If you use the Michigan State Park Campground system, some big changes are coming for 2022. The first significant change you're likely to see is an increase of nightly camping fees. Beginning on April 1st, 2022, the fees will increase $10 per night for cabins, $15 per night for lodges, and $2 to $8 per night for campsites, depending on the location of the park and the day of the week. Weekends will be $3 per night additional. Rustic sites will increase no more than $5 per night. So why the rate increases? There are actually several reasons for this. First, many improvements need to be made to the existing park system. The State Park Campground system began over 100 years ago, and most campgrounds were built 50 years ago or longer, where the typical camper was either a tent or a 19-foot travel trailer, not the 30 to 40-foot palaces on wheels we see today. Secondly, 97% of all revenue for state park operations and improvements are funded by site fees, recreational passports, concessions, and royalties from state-owned resources. In other words, the parks are self-funded by those that use them. Currently, the state park system has 12,223 improved and 3,897 primitive campsites. Since 2019, state park attendance has increased by a whopping 30%, so that puts even more wear and tear on the state park system. You might think that the 30% increase would also relate to a 30% increase in revenue, but that may not actually be the case. Anyone that has used the campgrounds can confirm that the parks are typically full on weekends, yet almost empty during the week. It is almost impossible to get a weekend spot unless you book several months in advance. Unfortunately, this imbalance of the park's use during the weekend versus weekday increased costs, as they have to provide wages to the campground workers as well as purchasing of goods and services for the entire season, but the revenue is mostly only during the weekend. Since this is a self-funded system, it must be run more like a business. And I think even with the price increases, the cost of camping is no more than the typical private campground, yet you have beautiful vistas, views of the Great Lakes, and so on that you can't get at the private parks. So, with the increase in fees, the most popular campgrounds will be around $42 per night for 50 amp and $38 per night for 30 amp service. The less popular parks can still be as low as $25 per night. Perhaps the best news, though, is that there is going to be a huge infrastructure improvement to the state park system due to a $264 million capital investment. The improvements included needed upgrades to water, electrical, and sanitary systems, roads and parking lots, construction of toilet and shower buildings, preservation of historic structures, enhancements to trails, and more. Anyone that has been paying attention to the state park campgrounds knows that in 2021, outages in everything from flooded dump stations to loss of power due to downed trees means these things need some attention. Buildings, beach and bathhouses, and roads are also slated for improvement. However, not everything that will be improved will be related to campgrounds. Harbors, state marinas, boat ramps, and day use areas will also be improved, but the campgrounds will get their fair share of improvements. Over the last few years, there have already been some improvements to most parks. Most parks have at least had a few pull-through sites, although those sites are usually made by combining two individual sites into one, which actually reduces the amount of available campsites. However, campgrounds like Hartwick Pines has had at least 1/3 of its sites converted to 50 amp service with full hookups and asphalt paved pull-throughs. Expect to see many more parks adding these upgrades. For example, at Wilderness State Park, an entire section has been added for modern RVs. Aloha State Park, for example, is supposed to have all of the south campgrounds converted to 50 amp service and will result in the removal of the south bathhouse. When you access the Michigan State Park Campground Reservation System, the campground that you're interested in usually will have an update notice in the upper left-hand corner. When you click on that, it will tell you the current status of the park, when it opens, and what improvements that will generally be made. This has upset some tent campers that want to use that area, as there will no longer be a bath facility in the immediate area. But I suppose that is the price of progress. The campground has to weigh tent campers versus modern RV campers, and since the modern RV campers tend to bring in more revenue, then you can understand where the emphasis is going to be. However, what that means in the short term is that you may have a hard time obtaining a campsite during the construction phase of the parks. So my best advice if you will be using Michigan's State Park Campgrounds in 2022 is to reserve early and remain flexible. You can reserve a campsite for up to 6 months in advance, and I'm providing the link here to the website for doing so.